Let me ask you a question. A question that you've had, or at least heard, but maybe it's a question you haven't answered completely. It's simple, really, nothing truly complex about it. No tricks, no gimmicks, just a question. If you permit me, I'll present it as straightforward as I can. What is a warrior? I'd say it's a good question. It comes up often enough in conversation, but have you truly thought about what it means? Sure, some of you are spouting enough positive adjectives to fill a small book. You present it in a manner that isn't elementary, but is understandable. You'd say a warrior is someone who fights for those who are weak or those who can't. Or you'd say perhaps a warrior is someone who represents strength and follows a strict code of honor. Both are right. But a warrior is much more than just descriptions. A warrior is more than passable definitions. A warrior is defined by his actions, and a Mandalorian is the embodiment of action. As we understand them, Mandalorians were some of the greatest warriors the galaxy has ever seen, and were likely to never feel such an impact again. But what makes a Mandalorian different than any other type of fighter, anyone else who picks up a stick or stone and hurls it at their enemy? To history, what sets the Mandalorians apart is their fierce reputation for becoming fearsome mercenaries and bounty hunters. In times predating the Galactic Civil War into the Old Republic era, Mandalorians would enter direct conflict with the Jedi Order. Now, this was thousands of years prior to the Clone Wars. During this period, planet Mandalore, the presumed homeworld of all Mandalorians, would be devastated into a wasteland, a toxic sphere ill-equipped to support even the most tenacious of life. Unfortunately, we know very little about this conflict, but what we do know is that it was planet Mandalore's death that was the killing blow to Mandalorian spirit for a period of time, until they would rise again to wage war on the Old Republic. It's rumored that during the wars of the Old Republic, the Mandalorian clans united under a Mandalore, their uncrowned but unanimously supported war boss. Now, Mandalore is an elusive character, secures dominance over a majority of the clans. Thankfully, for the rest of the galaxy, these Mandalores are few and far between. The United Mandalore clans will go on to fight for the Sith Empire against the Republic. Whether motivated by lucrative contracts or the lust for continued battle is perhaps down to the individual Mandalorian, as opposed to the overall political gain. The Mandalorians possess a long history of warfare against the Republic, oftentimes seen as an unkillable rival. The Mandalorians never possessed the true capacity to fully occupy all of the Republic worlds. Instead, they would sack Rim worlds, target trade sectors, and annihilate lightly defended planets. Now, this isn't to say that Mandalorians shied from even battles. The old saying goes something on the lines of, "A good death is far more warranted than a child's victory." Closer to the current timeline, just before the invasion of Naboo, a pair of competing ideas would take hold within Mandalorian culture. The first school of thought, and perhaps the more widely accepted notion of what it is to be a Mandalorian, was closely attached to their warrior past. A member of society must engulf themselves in constant struggle. The opposite school of thought, led by Satine Kryze, produced a notion that Mandalorians should adopt a culture of pacifism and peace, dubbing themselves the new Mandalorians. During this civil war, Jedi Masters Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi were tasked with protecting the new Mandalorians' leader from the Old Guard aggressors. By the end of the war, Satine, now a ruling duchess, exiled the remaining warrior clans to the planet of Concordia. The Civil War reduced Mandalore into an inhospitable wasteland, requiring biodomes or safe zones to be constructed to allow for a continued civilized presence. During the Clone Wars, the Mandalorians would again find themselves facing eternal strife and retribution from the remnants of the Old Guard faction, now calling themselves Death Watch. This Death Watch was led by Concordia Governor Pre Vizsla, and under his protection and guidance, Death Watch would plot to see Mandalorian society return to their warrior roots. To do so effectively, Vizsla constructed a ploy to see the Republic occupy Mandalore, a neutral system at the time under Duchess Satine. To make the occupation from the Republic a certainty, Vizsla would have the Death Watch attack Republic cruisers, diplomats, and even orchestrate violent terrorist attacks on civilian targets throughout the system. Vizsla's thinking, however misguided, proposed that if the Republic forced a military occupation on the Mandalore system, Mandalorians would have no choice but to fight for their freedom, all the while heralding Death Watch as their supposed saviors. However, when doctored evidence was shown to be false during the Republic hearing on the Mandalore Defense Resolution, the occupation order was immediately rescinded, and Mandalore was guaranteed its independence. Pre-Vizsla, now on the run from both the Republic and the new Mandalorian loyalists, was forced to align himself with a particularly sinister force to achieve his goals. During Death Watch's run from authority, many of its members would pursue lucrative contracts as mercenaries, finding themselves living out their dreams of constant conflict, all the while fattening their purse. But Vizsla still dreamed of a return to the ancient ways of the Mandalorian people, and keeping to this idealism, he would cross paths and ally with the Sith Lord Darth Maul's Shadow Collective. Ultimately, this proved to be Vizsla's downfall. Regardless of how brutal he may have been, few can match a fully trained and now mechanically enhanced Sith Lord. Vizsla attempted to wrestle power back from Maul to prevent the Sith from ruling over his people on Mandalore, a power no outsider should possess. Unfortunately, Vizsla proved to be only another dead warrior in another long and dark chapter of Mandalorian history. Perhaps for Vizsla it was a good death, a Mandalorian death, but we may never know. With the death of Vizsla, Mandalore was now subjected to a coup d'etat led by Darth Maul's new Death Watch. During this political upheaval, the Mandalore system would fall under control of Darth Maul, the new Death Watch, and the puppeted Prime Minister Almec. Central to the opposition of the new leadership was the pacifist Duchess Satine, who had, prior to the start of the Clone Wars, forged a new Mandalorian identity. Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi was tasked with investigating rumors of another civil war brewing on Mandalore, and was quickly dispatched to gauge the situation. But Obi-Wan's arrival to the system would trigger the capture and untimely death of Duchess Satine and the downfall of Maul's new Mandalore. Obi-Wan would escape, report the successful coup attempt, and murder of the Duchess to the Republic. Interestingly though, shortly after Obi-Wan's report to the Senate, Maul and Death Watch would be removed from power on Mandalore, beginning a transitional period for the new government. With the end of the Clone Wars and the rise of the Galactic Empire, the successor government after the Grand Republic, Mandalore would fall under control of this new empire. At this point, records of Death Watch are sparse and few between. Perhaps the last of them were wiped out, or they simply faded into ambiguity. But another group, called the Protectors, did rise from the ashes of Mandalore's occupation by the Empire. These Protectors believed in the ancient rule of Mandalore and were led by an inspiring new leader, Fenro. These Protectors were given a small fiefdom to independently protect and operate in on the Empire's behalf, and many Mandalorians seeking to fulfill lives of conflict would go on to serve in the Imperial military. But are these Protectors true Mandalorians? Was Death Watch? Were they warriors? These are the real questions. And perhaps it comes down to something as simple as what you believe, that maybe, if you follow the path of a warrior, of a Mandalorian, it truly doesn't matter what historians may say. If you have the culture and the attitude, if your beliefs are defended by your actions, then you are exactly what you are. A warrior. And maybe a Mandalorian.